Things every British home had in the 1980s. The 1980s in Britain was a decade when life seemed to balance tradition and innovation. Homes were filled with new gadgets, bold decor, and plenty of quirks that defined family life. From chunky televisions to patterned carpets, there were certain items you could guarantee to find in every British house. They weren't just possessions, they were part of the fabric of everyday living. In this video, we'll step back in time and explore the things every British home had in the 1980s, reminding us of an era filled with color, comfort, and character. 1. The living room television and VHS revolution. The living room was the heart of the home in the 1980s, and at the center of it all was the television. By this decade, most families had upgraded to a color TV, often encased in bulky wooden frames with dials or chunky remote controls. Popular brands like Ferguson, Bush, and Thorn became household names. Saturday evenings brought the family together for Blind Date with Cilla Black, launched 1985. Only Fools and Horses, 1981. Or the explosive arrival of EastEnders in 1985. For children, mornings meant cartoons on Going Live from 1987 and afternoons glued to Grange Hill. But it wasn't just about watching live television anymore. This was also the era of the VHS recorder. For the first time, families could record shows, rewind them, and build their own libraries of taped programs. Stacks of VHS tapes, carefully labeled in marker pen, would sit proudly beside the telly. Coronation Street Christmas Special, 1985. Dad's taped football highlights and even slightly dodgy off-air recordings of Hollywood blockbusters were household staples. Renting films was part of the fun. Early in the decade, families popped into the local independent video shop to choose a Friday night movie. By the late 80s, chains like Blockbuster began appearing in Britain, changing home viewing forever. The excitement of loading a tape, waiting for the whirring mechanism, and watching the fuzzy opening credits was unlike anything modern streaming can replicate. This combination of TV and VHS made entertainment a central part of British homes in the 1980s. Shared moments, shared laughter, and sometimes shared arguments over who had taped over Dad's football. 2. The home telephone. From hallway fixtures to status symbols. Another unmistakable feature of British homes in the 1980s was the telephone. Usually placed in the hallway, these chunky devices came in standard colors like cream, dark green, or beige. Early in the decade, many homes still had rotary dial phones, where you had to spin the numbers and wait for the wheel to click back. By the mid-80s, push-button models were becoming common. Phone calls were short and often rushed because of expensive phone bills. Parents would constantly remind teenagers not to natter too long to friends. Some families invested in extra-long curly cords, which allowed calls to spill from the hall into the living room or kitchen, giving the illusion of privacy. The telephone was more than a utility. It was a social hub. It was where mums called neighbors to arrange tea, dads phoned work, and kids got the excitement of their first mate ringing the house. Call waiting and answering machines were rare luxuries, so missed calls simply meant missed connections. For many, the phone was also a status symbol. The GPO, General Post Office, still tightly controlled installations, but things shifted when post office telephones became British Telecom in 1981 and later privatized in 1984. Homes that boasted sleek trim phones or even multiple extensions seemed a little more modern than the rest. The sound of the ringing bell in the hall, the dash to answer it, and the drama of shouting, "It's for you," became daily rituals in British homes in the 1980s. 3. The hi-fi system and the era of music at home. Music was everywhere in the 1980s, and no British home felt complete without some kind of hi-fi system. Whether it was a modest record player or a full-blown tower unit with turntable, dual cassette deck, radio tuner, and detachable speakers, the hi-fi was a source of pride. Teenagers would spend hours creating mixtapes, painstakingly recording songs from the radio, complete with abrupt DJ interruptions or accidental adverts. Swapping mixtapes became a language of friendship, even romance. Top-loading cassette players with big chunky buttons were iconic, as was the ritual of using a pencil to rewind tangled tapes. Vinyl records were still hugely popular, with albums by Duran Duran, Culture Club, and The Smiths stacked beside parents' collections of the Beatles and ABBA. Families might gather to play LPs during parties, but it was often the teenagers blasting out pop hits in their bedrooms that defined the soundtrack of suburban Britain. As the Walkman arrived, music became more portable, but the hi-fi remained a family fixture. Some households even had music centers built into large wooden cabinets, often doubling as living room furniture. These hi-fis weren't just appliances. They represented identity, taste, and aspiration. They were part of what made British homes in the 1980s feel alive with sound and personality. 4. Bold decor, patterned carpets, and wallpaper. If there's one thing that instantly transports you back to the 1980s, it's the interior decor. British homes were filled with bold patterns, loud colors, and textures that seem almost unthinkable today. Carpets were deep, shaggy, and often in shades of brown, orange, or avocado green. Some homes even kept their avocado bathroom suites from the 1970s, out of fashion by then, but still clinging on through the early 80s. Vacuuming shag carpets was a daily battle against embedded crumbs, but the softness made homes feel cozy. Wallpaper was equally dramatic. Giant florals, geometric patterns, and metallic sheens adorned living room walls. Feature walls, now trendy again, were often standard practice. Bedrooms had stripes, nurseries had cartoon characters, and kitchens proudly displayed bold tiles. Every home also seemed to have a set of curtains with heavy pelmets, patterned in clashing shades, alongside ornaments on display cabinets, porcelain figurines, glass animals, and the occasional novelty souvenir from seaside holidays. Decor in British homes in the 1980s wasn't about subtlety. It was about comfort, personality, and showing off a little flair. Walking into a friend's house meant being hit with an explosion of color and texture, a far cry from today's minimalist grays and neutrals. 5. Heating the home, gas fires and electric blankets. Keeping warm in the 1980s was an event in itself. Central heating was spreading fast, but many families still relied on the trusty gas fire in the living room. These units glowed orange with fake coals, producing instant warmth and the illusion of a traditional hearth. Families would huddle around them on winter nights, sipping hot drinks and watching telly. By the late 1980s, around 3/4 of UK homes already had central heating, but the living room fire still served as the cozy centerpiece. Bedrooms were colder, and that's where the electric blanket became a savior. Plugged in before bed, it warmed the sheets just enough to make climbing under the covers bearable. Some homes also had hot water bottles, often covered in knitted cozies, that added a homely touch. Heating wasn't just functional, it shaped family life. The living room became the main gathering point because it was the warmest, and kids often played on the floor right in front of the fire. For many, these warming fixtures are among the most nostalgic British household items of the decade. 6. The kitchen gadgets, from Teasmades to soda streams. The kitchen of a British home in the 1980s was a treasure trove of gadgets. At the heart of it all was the Teasmade, a device most popular in the 1960s to 70s, but still perched on many bedside tables in the 80s, brewing a cup of tea as the alarm clock went off. Then came the SodaStream. This fizzy drink machine allowed kids to make their own cola, lemonade, or orangeade at home. The excitement of carbonating tap water and adding syrup made it feel futuristic. "Get busy with the fizzy" became a household slogan. Other common gadgets included pressure cookers, slow cookers, and the toast rack, a distinctly British item that made every breakfast look like a hotel service. Microwaves also entered kitchens during this decade, at first as luxury items and later as everyday essentials. By the end of the 80s, more than half of homes owned one, shaping a new era of convenience food. The 1980s kitchen represented modern living, a blend of tradition, Sunday roasts, Yorkshire puddings, and innovation. Microwave lasagnas, fizzy drinks at home. 7. The drinks cabinet and evening entertaining. No British home of the 1980s felt complete without a drinks cabinet or trolley. Even modest households had a collection of bottles, proudly brought out when visitors arrived. Popular drinks included whiskey, sherry, Cinzano, and martini. Retro favorites like Snowballs, Advocat and Lemonade, and Babycham had peaked earlier in the 60s and 70s, but they lingered on into the 1980s, especially at Christmas, when cut glass tumblers clinked and the drinks trolley came alive. Alongside the drinks, every living room had a collection of coasters to protect the coffee table, often tacky, often humorous, and always a fixture of 1980s social life. This tradition reflected how the decade wasn't just about family life, but about entertaining friends, neighbors, and relatives in the comfort of home. 8. Photo albums and family memories. Finally, one of the most sentimental things every British home had in the 1980s was the family photo album. Kept on bookshelves or in sideboards, these bulky albums were filled with prints developed at Boots or local chemists. Holidays at Butlins, family weddings, school portraits, and Christmas mornings all found their way into these albums. Polaroid snapshots added instant fun, while official studio portraits, often with awkward backdrops, gave a more formal record of family life. And the party photos? Instead of Colin the Caterpillar cakes, who didn't appear until 1990, snapshots often featured Viennetta, launched 1982, Arctic Roll, or a classic Black Forest gâteau. These desserts became iconic centerpieces of 1980s celebrations. Unlike today's endless digital scroll, flipping through these albums was a cherished activity. Families gathered on sofas to relive memories, laugh at bad hairstyles, or cringe at old outfits. They weren't just photos, they were time capsules of life in British homes in the 1980s. The things every British home had in the 1980s tell the story of a decade when family, comfort, and simple pleasures defined daily life. From VHS tapes to SodaStreams, patterned carpets to Viennetta on the table, these household staples still carry the warmth of memory. They remind us that nostalgia isn't about things, it's about the lives lived around them. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.